In this episode, we have a dear friend of mine, Badr Al-Hasani. Badr is an account manager at Wavo, a marketing and analytics company in the music industry. He's responsible for managing media campaigns and developing digital strategies for major releases. Together, we explore how AI integration can expand our creative boundaries, the concerns about AI replacing human artists, what becomes possible due to the democratization of music creation with AI voices, and of course, the ethical considerations of mimicking the voice of an artist, alive or deceased. Stick around for an enlightening conversation ahead. Enjoy.
I currently work as a account manager at Wavo. So my job is basically talking with the marketing managers for the big three labels, which are Universal, Warner, and Sony, and helping them strategize and coming up with different ads across different DSPs and social media platforms. So that's pretty much the TLDR of what I do, but it's really exciting stuff. And I think anybody like me who loves music, it's always changing. You're always learning new things. um the excitement is always real and it never really dies out. So yeah.
So you are working a lot with the business team behind the artists. What are you seeing and hearing when it comes to AI and music? Are these managers and are the artists afraid? Are they embracing AI in the music industry? What are your thoughts around that, and what are you seeing?
You know what, honestly, Evan, I feel like AI in music is still super new. um in terms of like, in the front lines of the artist and um marketing, I feel like it's not yet gone to the point where artists are fearful. But I will say, I don't know if you remember a few months back, like the Weekend and Drake had an AI collab go on Spotify, got all the streams, all that stuff. I remember the artists Drake and The Weeknd were like, "What the hell is this?" So I think it's definitely like people are talking about it. I don't know if it's gone to the point now where it's like cemented as a really big issue. Um, but I know, in terms of like the law and stuff, it's like labels are not on board. All these new songs that are being put up on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever that have AI, I think, they're just getting removed. So I think it's very anti-AI for the time being, but I definitely think like with time, I think artists and labels will start looking at AI as more of a tool than something that will replace them overall.
Yeah, that Drake and the Weeknd AI generated song garnered so many listens. It was really fascinating to hear how close they were able to get their voices and mimic the actual person. And I was surprised that they didn't jump on, like the actual people didn't jump on to explore this. I'm not saying that, they should have promoted it more and whatever, but I felt a little disappointed in that, in from my perspective, given that the Weeknd released an NFT collection, so he's somewhat interested. I don't know him personally. I wish I did, but he's somewhat. I assume that he was somewhat interested in the emerging tech space, right? Because he released an NFT collection a couple years ago. Why not explore what are the possibilities with AI generated sounds, the same way that Grimes recently allowed other artists to use her voice, and I believe she collects some sort of royalty every time they do. So there are opportunities to make money if the artists want to. Now, of course, Grimes, The Weeknd, different types of music, different levels of popularity and all that altogether, probably different strategies and brands that they want to create for themselves. But I felt, and am probably biased because of my interest in emerging tech, but I felt like there was an opportunity for artists to use AI voices, given how popular the single was between Drake and The Weeknd. I don't know if it was two separate songs or one song with both. I don't remember, but I thought there was an opportunity. So based on what you're saying right now, the industry is still very much not really in favor of exploring or considering AI generated voices.
Well, you have to keep in mind, like, for the weekend specifically, like there's a huge label behind him. I think Grimes might be indie, um, but it really falls down. When it comes to the voice and stuff, it's a lot of it is really owned by the label itself. So I think that makes things a lot more complicated. Like, I think artists may be interested in exploring a lot of this stuff because I think, there's so much that can be done with AI, and I think we're just really touching the base of it. I mean, we're not just talking about things that we can do to release music in full AI. We're talking about like using AI to, improve production of a song, to augment vocals, um, diversifying to a different language, even. I don't know if you remember like Avril Lavigne girlfriend back in the day released it in 8 different languages, and it was badly pronounced in every language. But these are just like the pinnacle of what we can envision for now, what AI can do. But yeah, I mean, it's just there's so much that could be done, um, but everything is still super new. So yeah.
Speaking of things that could be done, like what are some examples of how artists, assuming we live in a world where they are embracing AI technology, like what are some cool things that you see artists and even the management teams doing with AI?
So, like as you mentioned, Grimes, I think Grimes is a good example of someone who was like, you know what, I'm not afraid of this. I'm gonna make most of this, and I think this was in response to the Weeknd and Drake, notoriety over there. But she offered her AI voice to different artists, different DJs, producers, for some royalties. I do think though it does come with a price. um, I think a lot of artists fear doing what Grimes did just because, any bad song, any maybe something a different sound change, a different, genre could really impact the legacy of an artist. I've been seeing like recently a lot of AIs on YouTube using like deceased artists like Whitney Houston, Prince, Michael Jackson. Not only is it non-consent, but it's also like, if these songs are fully released as singles, they could really diminish not only the legacy, but the relationship that these artists have, with the audiences or with their fans.
That's a fair point. The illegal use of another person's voice and the impact that it could have on their estate, especially if they're deceased, and just their whole reputation. And for some art, I'm not saying that artists get bigger when they're dead, but there's also an element of we're no longer going to get that sound or that energy anymore once that artist has passed away. But if there is an AI generated song that has the exact same voice, and if there's some sort of hologram that they create and they create this show, I think it was a Michael Jackson show. I could be wrong, or maybe Elvis. They created someone had created a hologram years ago, pre Chat GPT.
I think it was
Uh,
Tupac, if I'm not
was it?
mistaken.
Oh, could have
I
been.
think it was
Yes,
Tupac.
yes,
Yes.
yes. Oh my God. Yeah, you're right. You're right. It was. But you can imagine a world where now, with these AI generated voices, you're going to Las Vegas. There's this light show with this hologram of an artist, and it's their exact voice and their movements and all that. It's weird in a cool way, I think. Like there definitely needs to be some sort of regulation and guidelines. Maybe that's we're going to see that in the contracts that artists make with record labels, like what happens after you die, and you want to give your voice to an AI generator, and you still want to provide performances to whoever might be still a fan of your music beyond your death after you've passed away. I think that could be an interesting commercial opportunity for artists. But for some artists, they might say, you know what, when I'm out, I'm out, and I don't want my voice to be replicated. I don't want my image to be replicated. And so that's also a very fair thing. But at least they now have the choice. Well, I guess not yet, but eventually artists, I'm hoping, will have the choice to say yes or no to that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I feel like we even see this right now with non-AI stuff, or like artists that have disease like Top Smoke, XXX Temptation, like labels, if they have the chance. I think even like Aaliyah had a few tracks after she had passed. So So I think it will be a similar thing with AI, um, or definitely like if it's something that needs to be put into their contract. Um, I think as well, like the rules and regulations will definitely be modified as this becomes more of a real thing.
Do you think that that AI will replace artists, musical artists?
The heavy hitting question. Honestly, I don't think it will personally. Um, I think AI, no matter what, cannot replicate, the human touch, the human emotion. I think as much as AI can, improve, without human guidance, I think it's just nothing merely but an additional tool. But with that being said, in the hands of a human, I think it could be used as a really beneficial tool, especially in maybe the situation of someone who does not have the vocal ability, um, even production wise. And I'm just saying this like even as someone that's observed the kind of field and sphere of music production. 20 years ago, you only had a handful of producers, and now you've got like anybody really that can learn it on boot camp, on different programs, and they can learn how to do it. I mean, you got Kate Renata, who was himself like self-taught producer. And I think this is just gonna be a next step in really making um, easy access to production. It's going to open a lot of doors. Um, Maybe even vocals, like someone that doesn't have the right pitch can use AI to and harmonies, fix the pitch, apply vocal effects. So if you're going to ask in conclusion if it's going to replace singers, I don't think so. But I think it will be a really beneficial tool, and I think that could definitely change the industry as a whole. But artist integrity, songwriting, our favorite artists, have an emotional connection to their fans, got personality. These are just human entities that AI can't do as of yet. Um, but maybe potentially in the future, never say never, but I don't really see that happening anytime soon.
That's fair. So you're saying, okay, so maybe the time horizon is a bit longer. Like it's not going to happen next year, that's for sure. But right, like we're both huge fans of The Weeknd, so it's probably going to come up a couple times. But if I can make my voice sound like The Weeknd, like perfectly, and I put on a show, I think society probably is in a place where they're going to see Evan Pitchy that sounds like The Weeknd. But what if you didn't know it was me? Like, what if it was just behind a curtain, or there's now these digital influencers, right? They like I think Michaela is a well known digital. This person doesn't really exist, but they are an influencer, and now you can layer on beautiful sounding voice because you said that there are, if the artist doesn't have a certain range, you can use AI to give that person that range. So if you're using AI to modify, let's say 20% of your vocal abilities, what's stopping you from going to 50, 70, 80, 100? And then all together, you've totally taken someone with no vocal abilities and you've given them an amazing sounding voice. And you could argue that today that already exists with autotune, right? Travis Scott, I love Travis Scott, but he's got a ton of music with autotune that is not his real voice, obviously. So where do we draw the line between autotune and AI modified vocals?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I really do see it as an extension. Could be as a autotune. I mean, you're using a tool to help make your voice sound good. So I definitely think, like, no doubt about it, the sphere of the music industry will change. Um, you know, from songwriting, you can use AI to write your songs. You can, use it to produce music, to fix your voice. Um, I don't think there's much to stop you there. I think the maybe the one line there will be like the actual performance. I don't think we're there yet with AI and like performing and like, if you put a robot or like, let's say in the situation of the Tupac hologram, the hologram can't know when the audience is hyped up. They can't follow cues. You still need that emotion stuff. Same thing with like, I mean, I know lip sync is definitely a thing, but you're just not gonna get that same level of engagement or fan base versus versus an organic artist in that situation. So I think that will differentiate it a little bit, um, but not to say that AI will definitely diminish the obstacles when it comes to having your voice sound good. And you know what? Honestly, this could be a jump into like a different topic of like our artists even nowadays not having AI, but they are still seen as influencers. You know what I mean? So what's stopping influencers from becoming musicians? Because musicians right now are already influencers. To have your radio hit, you have to be a personality on TikTok, like Lizzo or Harry Styles. These people have personalities, Cardi B. So it's kind of like the same recipe where you need to be a personality to succeed. But I guess this situation is kind of opposite. So similar, but yes, definitely we'll be seeing a change there.
So before, in a previous episode, I had Chuck Lapointe, who is the CEO of Narcity, and which houses MTL Blog and Narcity publications. And we spoke about the impact of AI in journalism, and he mentioned how it would remove some of the mundane tasks. And then I had said how it sounds like it will AI will enable people to be more human. It will give more time to the reporter to focus on the things that make them human. And what I'm hearing from you is that there's a potential, that same potential in the music space, where you can have a hologram performing and moving around with the voice, an AI generated voice that sounds exactly like the artist that has passed away, but you won't have that human experience because that hologram won't have the same ability to interact with the crowd the way that a human can interact with a crowd. So I'm seeing this recurring theme as we, in society, that we were hearing a lot of like, oh, AI is doom and gloom. Like, of course, there's pro this, but there's a lot of people kind of showing some genuine concern. But all that to say that it's AI really has a potential to make us more human, because if we're able to push off some of the mundane tasks or push off or delegate certain things that we do not feel are part of our identity or part of our interests, if we delegate that to the AI, we then have more time and space to flourish and deliver that human experience to the crowd or to our peers or whoever it is that we want. So I'm liking what you're saying, because it's now kind of reinforcing why we might not have as much to fear about AI. Now, I'm not talking about military stuff and a bunch of like that outside of weapons technology. There is a really strong potential that AI might make us more connected as humans.
For sure. I think honestly there could be fatigue, with technology and people just want something that's more human. Or there could be the opposite. I mean, I think there's I forgot the name of the artist, but there's a Japanese hologram artist, totally not a real person. And that artist is kind of like appreciated and kind of glamorized as a fully hologramic artist, but they don't exist. So I think it could really go two different ways. But as you nailed it in the head, I think like there'll be fatigue from something that's fully technological and something that's more human. Even in the case of like autotune, I think in our generation we've gone through like T-Pain, many autotune artists, and then we broke that cycle. We didn't want to hear autotune anymore. Not to say that there isn't a space for it, but we definitely got sick of it, and we were looking for the next thing. So I think we could be seeing the same thing over here.
Do you think that so given that AI will democratize the ability to sound really nice or to sound the way that you want? If I want to sound like Travis Scott, but add a bit more of something and kind of, but like use Travis Scott's sound as the base starting point and then create my own sound. Do you think that the ability to create your own sound, like that AI has given everyone the ability to create their own sound? Do you think that that will influence the music industry, like the professional music industry? If everyone can now create their own sound, do you think that the artists that like vocally talented artists that are signed, do they have something to be afraid of if people like you and I, who may not be traditional singers, can sound like really good singers? And B, what do you think from a business perspective? How will business music managers now have to think about placing their signed artists when it comes to uh, concert tours or endorsement deals and things like that? Like, how will the business change as a result of everyone being able to sound really good?
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's such a it's a really, you know, there's so many opportunities basically, and it's hard to see from now, but I definitely think the whole kind of recipe of, a label getting an artist in, they release a single. I feel like, in many years that could completely change if we have the ability to create our own music. I don't think that there is not going to be any more use of these artists because these artists could, contribute their voices towards AI versus have AI like completely generate, their own voices, own audio. So I definitely think there's still a place for vocalists and creatives in that sense. But I don't think the way that we see artists now will stay the same, especially if every person, me, myself, everybody that we know has the ability to create their own music to their own, genre that they want to, what sounds good to them. I think there's a lot of change awaiting for the industry.
Does that scare you, or do you feel a sense of excitement from that, given your job and your interests?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I guess it's a little scary, but not in the sense of being scared to lose, my role or for any of these artists to be scared. I just think things will shift into something that we can't foresee. So for that reason, it's just like the fear of the unknown of what AI could turn into. But I do just want to emphasize as well. I think a lot of that will take so much time just, as I think a natural response to things changing is a lot of labels will end up, you know, having a lot more copyright laws and regulation. And I think these regulations will make that process a little slower than, pure chaos or just pure change. Um, so it's a really of a matter of, we wait and see what will happen, but um, it will just completely fall under copyright laws and regulation. And I think that um, will play a huge part in this.
One of the when you said about this, things that we won't expect. I was listening to you and looking at your impressive vinyl wall behind you, and I thought it'd be funny if one day it's just my face on your vinyl wall behind you.
Yeah, just have that bitch's face all over on each vinyl.
No, I would create an album. Could you imagine the day I create an album and then you've got like on your famed vinyl wall picture of my face? No, that would not happen. That's
Just
even
sell us your mixtape on the
yeah,
street. Just give us a vinyl.
yeah. No, but I think it is cool for those who might want to experiment with this, who may want who sing in the shower, but they're not like that good, and they're not necessarily wanting to be an artist, like a professional artist. For them to still sound professional for fun, I think that's how TikTok kind of started with Musically, where you could lip sync above the singer's voice, and a lot of kids, young teenagers, were into that. So you can imagine a world where that evolves into a point where you can produce your own album with your image, your sound that has been heavily modified, but it doesn't really matter. And if you use ChatGPT to write the song and then you add your own emotions and your own thoughts here and there, you pretty much have reduced the whole songwriting and song creation experience into a couple steps, thanks to AI, which is great for some, but I could imagine how for those who find themselves or consider themselves to be artists, I can understand the artistic desire to share and interpret the human experience that they're going through in song format. And I think that that's where we're going to see the difference between art and a product, for lack of a better term. Whereas, sure, a piece of art can be a product, but correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you work in the space, but it is my interpretation or my thought that art is not necessarily a tool in the same way that a hammer like solves a problem. If you need to nail something, you take the hammer and it gets the job done. Art can only evolve once the species or the community has its basic needs met. I think more often than not. Some might say that, art can be a distraction if you're going through hard times. You create legends and stories to entertain the kids in your community if there's a really difficult time. So there is value in art during traumatic periods. But most art, at least during non-traumatic times, are only possible. Most pieces of art or works of art are only possible because society has evolved to a point where your basic needs are met and you now have time and ability to sit down and think and express your human experience.
Yeah, I mean, you said it yourself. It's all through a human experience. So I think like even when it comes to music, and I think we've have the kind of luxury of looking at what AI has done with physical art or paintings and stuff. No matter what, it cannot just replicate the full human experience. At least not in this point. I don't think maybe in the future even. It's just it, we. I think even with music, it's just that you can use AI as a tool, but it there are just still some things that you will need a human for, and I don't think that we can depend on AI to get that. No matter what, I know, like in the sense that like emotional music is based on like trauma, the human experience, and all that stuff. But ultimately, it's going to revert back to a human that has created that. So when the answer always comes up, like, is AI going to replace a human? No, but we can definitely use that to translate our messages, make it a lot easier. Like as in the situation that you mentioned, like ChatGPT writing song lyrics, you know, where we can't depend on ChatGPT to write the full song for us, but it can give us ideas. It can contribute by mentioning some words that rhyme, things that sound good. Maybe in the future, even with AI, we can um, depend on a voice that can give us a demo of what the song is going to sound like before the song is even completed. Um, but it will just be merely a tool, I think, and not um, a full replacement of like songwriters, for example. Because I think
So
these are different, definitely still super important parts of the songwriting process.
yeah, and that is a great point. The human experience and the human interpretation of life, whether that's writing or creating the song or even experiencing and consuming the song, like listening to it, that human experience, it's the fact that we're all human, that we're able to connect with the artist. Even if that experience didn't happen to us, we're still able to relate, and that creates a feeling of, oh, I like this song in some way. So my next question is what is the experience, what is the musical experience for humans, and in your opinion, like, why do we listen to music? Why is it important in our civilization? I know this kind of might feel like it's outside of the questions that we said we'd talk about, but I'm curious to know from your perspective and working in the space, as we're talking about AI and this artificial, right? We have to be reminded that this isn't organic intelligence like we are. This is an artificially created intelligence. Therefore, we have to encode those experiences in some way. I'm not an expert in it. Someone could definitely tell me that I'm wrong if I am wrong. But we've got to encode certain things and certain parameters. As an organic being like you and I, what is the musical experience that we crave or that most of us enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it ultimately falls down to the feeling that music gives us. Because a lot of people can say, it's the vocals that do it for me, it's the beat that does it for me, it's, people love different genres, but I think the one commonality that all that has is the feeling that it gives to one person. Whether you want to be relaxing, listen to lo-fi music, whether you want to turn up and, listen to dance music, all that stuff. So I think it's the feeling, which is once again, a human emotion or just something that is, you know, not um, easily generated. Um, it takes like a human to give human emotion. I think, with AI, if we're going to revert back to that kind of space, we can get close to it, but I think there will always be that one thing missing. And maybe we'll be able to kind of decipher that and break that down more. I think just because everything is super new and like we are still, it's still a nice shiny new toy. And because it's a shiny new toy, we're seeing the really exciting parts of it. But when that becomes the norm, I think the human sense can then what is, point it out that this is maybe an AI generated thing versus a human generated thing. And maybe there'll be that something missing that will furthermore require the human perspective or emotion or all that stuff. But I think, if you ask me what it is that makes human music, I think it's the feeling that it brings to the human, and obviously something that's sonically engaging to the human ear.
Who do you think should own the rights of a song performed by an AI? Neither of us are lawyers, so this is not legal advice or legal opinions. Just throwing that out there from now. But who do you think should
Yeah.
own it from your perspective?
So it's a tough question because there's so many people involved. It's not just an AI machine. You've got
So break it
creators
down
of
for
the
us. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you've got the creators of the AI program, or like, it could be like a database of voices that someone owns. You've got the artists themselves that own their own voice. You've got the label. You've got, it's just so many parties. So I think it's definitely hard to say who owns it. It could be the creative person who wrote the song, like in the situation of like the Drake and the Weekend song. That person wrote the song. Are they not, if that money generates money, are they not entitled as a songwriter? So it's hard to kind of pinpoint who it is. I think ultimately, if you're using an artist's voice without their permission, um, the number one priority should be the artist because that is, their own voice. If it's, let's say in the future where it's an AI generated voice, it could be the person who created the voice themselves. Um, so yeah, I would say between those two, the artist and the creator of the AI. But then, obviously now thinking about it, like the artists, if they're signed to a label and it's in their contract that everything that comes out is belongs to the label, that technically falls under the label too. So a lot of technicalities there. Um, but I would definitely say like number one would be the voice and who the voice belongs to. Whether it's the artist or the label.
And I don't know if you saw this recently, what Jennifer Lopez is doing with Virgin Cruises. Uh, she essentially, this was an ad where, and they call it Gen AI, which I thought was brilliant, like JEN for Jennifer and then AI, so Gen AI, a great play on those words. Where basically you've got the marketing team in the background, but it's like a realistic image of Jennifer Lopez talking and sending this personalized message. But in the background, it's just the marketing team, but lending, or Jennifer Lopez had lended her image and her voice to Virgin Cruises to create this message. And I thought that was really interesting. There are some funny resemblances to Black Mirror and a certain episode that I don't want to spoil anything, so I don't want to go there. But I was fascinated by this newfound ability or this newfound tool that will enable celebrities or influencers, key members of society, to lend their image and now lend their voice for commercial gain if that's what they want. So I think that there's going to be a really interesting emergence of the same way how social media. So pre-social media, in order to be famous, you had to be a movie star or a famous singer. You had to go through the Hollywood route, and that's how you would be famous. Social media came around, and now everyone has the potential to be famous. Now, everyone's not famous, but you have a greater potential to be famous thanks to social media because you're going direct to the user. Now, you can go a bit further, and anyone can kind of be anyone if that celebrity, in this case, chooses to loan their image and their voice to whoever, right? If I guess Universal owns the James Bond, no, Prime, Amazon owns the James Bond movie series. If they wanted to make, hey, here is a digital version of James Bond, turn yourself into James Bond, you can now use his voice, his image, all of that, and create content as if you were him. Well, I said you could now. You can't now, but that is something that we can see in the future. Cameo, it enables you to rent the time of a celebrity for them to create a personalized message. And, of course, you pay for the message, but you're essentially paying for that 30 seconds of their time or that 60 seconds of their time to get that message. Imagine now if you don't need to pay for their time because you have direct access to their likeness and their voice. I think it's going to create some really interesting products for people. It's going to enable the creator economy to thrive in an interesting way that I honestly don't know yet what that's going to look like, because like you mentioned, the copyright laws and the regulation is going to be needed to make sure things are done ethically and properly. But it is exciting to see that these things are now possible. I'm not saying I want to necessarily be like James Bond. I mean, unless it was a Idris Elba type of James Bond, I might be more interested. But the current one, very cool guy, but just doesn't. I can't relate.
It's
So
not that's not Idris Elba, yeah. But you know what? Like that could be such a slippery slope as well. Like I'm just thinking, like, listen, if you've got like people taking advantage of that using, you know, Jennifer Lopez. Listen, if someone that has Jennifer Lopez and is advertising to my mom, it's game over. Like my mom's getting scammed. You know what I mean? Like it's such a slippery slope there. So it's interesting where that'll be. I definitely think there's a lot of like regulations, and I think there'll be heavy consequences for misuse. Because if there's a will, there's a way, and people can take advantage of that freedom that comes with. Even like Jennifer Lopez and stuff. If someone believes that that's not her genuine self saying these things and doing the things through AI, it could definitely tarnish her own image. So there'll definitely be barriers there. But I'm also like just curious to even like, if I had a movie and I could put my face onto James Bond, as you said, or something, does that take away from the enjoyment? Because I'm even thinking like, it just takes away from the fantasy of these people that you don't know, them living this life, blah blah blah. When you're in there, it kind of breaks that third, what do you call it? Like a
the fourth wall.
third, yeah, fourth wall. Sorry, thank you. So it's very interesting. I think with anything we'll test it out first and see how that goes. But it's very interesting to see where things could go and the possibilities. I haven't heard of that Jennifer Lopez thing though. I'm very intrigued in checking that out afterwards. Um, but yeah, I mean, as we're having this conversation, like I keep saying, like we really don't know the potential here, but it's just a matter of like, how that this can evolutionize and develop over time.
Yeah, and I'm an optimist. I know that it's not all rainbows and sunshine, and there are real security concerns, right? I think a couple months ago, my boss had posted something on LinkedIn about how you should turn off the voice ID, voice verification with your bank, right? So I don't know when they started to do this, but when you call your bank, they say like, we will use your voice to verify. We may collect your voice to verify your ID, make sure it's you and all that. Like, if you want to opt in, say yes, whatever. And I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. I said yes. And this was pre chat GPT and all that. And then she made that post around how, like, look how easy it is to scam people. Like, you can just record. I can go on and record 30 seconds of your voice batter and then pretend to be you and try to hack into your stuff. Someone could do the same to me. And then the next day I called my bank and, like, I cut all that. I said no, disable. I didn't even I had to press so many buttons on the automatic
They make it so hard.
thing. Yeah, they do make it difficult just to revoke access to something. And then they ask me questions like, oh, why? What do you mean why? If I choose to take it off, I want to take out my voice from your database. Why are you going to ask me why? Anyways, finally managed to do it. But yes, I do see that being a huge, huge threat, especially for artists who are putting their voices out there in the world. Right now, you've got the whole world who can mimic their voice. And fine, you might have 99, 95% that have good, fun intentions. They're not going to cause any harm to the artist, or they're not trying to. But you will have that 1, 2, 3, 4% who will try to attack the artist and scam them. And so that's a huge threat. And I can understand why they might, or why the record labels and even the artists themselves might feel hesitant towards that, because now you've given them another attack vector to access their accounts. And I had recently posted something on LinkedIn around Face ID. And if these AI companies are collecting your faces and they get hacked and they collect all, the hackers now have all your images, Face ID is useless, right? That becomes easy to crack because these hackers have your images. So in a world where hackers have your image, hackers have your voice, it becomes so much easier to access your information, and to engage in some really malicious activity and mess up your life. So I am 1,000% pro regulation of this stuff. I would hope that there are, just as quickly as there are AI companies popping up, I hope that there's a lot of money going towards research and cybersecurity so that we can enjoy these tools without necessarily the risk of one day it getting out of hand and not having the proper defenses to to reduce the amount of scams that are being generated because people mimicked your voice.
No, for sure, I agree. And I think with every problem, like I think this is going to be a very slow rollout of what AI can fully do. But I think with every step, there's going to be a problem. With every problem, there's going to be a solution. So I'm not very fearful in that sense. I don't think they're just going to throw it out and let people do whatever they want to do with it. But um, it's definitely interesting to see, the new companies that pop up, the new things that pop. We're gonna be in for a ride with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it might take some time for regulation to catch up, right? The Microsoft is this week. I read this week that they're being sued. Well, Microsoft and OpenAI are being sued because they scraped a bunch of people's data to train the large language models, and so they're being sued for illegal or just not proper use of data collection, something like that. So there are going to be a couple more of these gray zone areas or gray zone situations. There are going to be a couple mistakes, I expect. But I don't think that should stifle innovation. I don't think that should hurt or for people to be afraid. Within reason, right? There are people like malicious actors, and if something smells like a scam, it is probably best to wait. Like I want to use those AI image tools because I need a new headshot image. But when I checked the terms and conditions, I was like, I don't want you guys keeping my 20 to 30 photos that I need to upload. I don't want that. So I'd rather wait, keep my old headshot. Like it's fine. Um, versus just trying the tool out blindly and then realizing that I kind of regret giving all my information away just to get a couple AI generated pictures for my LinkedIn profile picture. Um, so looking forward, like, how do you think AI will shape music? Like in ways that we haven't discussed, like, are there things that you are either really curious and excited to see, or are there things that you're actually like, we do not want this to happen that we have not spoken about yet?
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I feel like as a person that loves music, I'm super excited. I'm super excited to get my voice to sound like Miguel. Like, whatever tool I could get to, be able to customize things to my own taste, to my own ear, to really further my experience in general with music. I mean, Spotify, itself as a platform has changed so much of the music industry, and the consumption and the sales of albums and how artists are treated. And it's like I think AI will be another Spotify in that sense, where it could really rock the music industry. But people will adapt, and for that reason, I don't think that it's too scary for artists themselves. It's not super scary for labels. I think they'll find a way to adapt, whether that is making really good money through their artists lending their voices, um, the escalation of really good music, collaborating between artists that don't have the ability to collaborate, maybe for a plethora of reasons, now are able to do so super easily, save costs in many ways, get money in many ways. So overall, I'm pretty excited to see where this goes. I'm not too scared. I think people like to, automatically jump into scare mode when something new like this comes on about, just because it's, still new. It's still, we haven't really reached the full depth of it. So natural response there, but I'm not too concerned.
That's an awesome way to end. Batter, thank you so much for sharing and indulging me with your knowledge and perspective on AI in the music space. It was a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Likewise, thanks for having me. It's been really fun. And I'm super excited to see where this thing is going. Like, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone.